phonemes. Phonemes come in allophones, and the allophones being variations on that basic sound. And so, for example, with P, there would be your aspirated P, P, and then your unaspirated P, kind of like P, and those are allophones, varieties of the phoneme. Morphemes can come in pairs or trios or great big bunches of allomorphs. And so, for example, often there will be a morpheme that serves a particular function in a grammar. P, kind of like P, and those are allophones, varieties of the phoneme. Morphemes can come in pairs or trios or great big bunches of allomorphs. And so, for example, often there will be a morpheme that serves a particular function in a grammar, and it will come in different forms depending on things like what sounds it occurs around, just like what allophone occurs depends on what other sounds are in the context. So, for example, our definite article in English can be either a or an. And so generally we're taught that the issue is that it's an before a vowel and a before a consonant. A and an are allomorphs of our definite article. For another example is that we saw how our plural marker in English underlyingly is actually z, not s, and that you can have either z or s on the surface. Z and s can be termed allomorphs of the plural morpheme, and so they're different flavors that it can come in. Or if you have ever suffered through learning a language like Spanish, where you have the long tables of verb conjugations, and so I speak hablo, you speak habla, she, it speaks habla, etc., you also remember that the verbs come in 3 conjugational classes. And so, for example, if you want to say you speak, then it's hablas. If you want to say you eat, the verb is comer. To say you eat, it's in the singular, it's comes. So it's as in one conjugational class, it's es in another conjugational class in the second person singular in the present tense. Those are allomorphs of the second person singular present tense morpheme. And so we have this kind of patterning. To get a sense of what an allomorph is, you might think about an old friend of mine's sneakers. There's this guy I knew a long time ago who had a pair of sneakers that otherwise looked the same but were a different color, and he would peg them to his outfits. And this was in a linguistics department, and so people started joking that he had allo shoes. And what they meant by that was that all of these shoes were basically the same thing, but depending on, in a sense, what sound they occurred next to or what clothes he happened to be wearing that day, he would wear them in a different color. So A, an, as, s, and then purple shoes one day when he was wearing lavender pants, and then yellow shoes if he was wearing his yellow pants or what have you. Allo shoes, allomorphs. So that is the basic way that morphemes work. And getting a sense of how to look at a language in terms of its morphemes rather than its words, which to a large extent is a matter of graphic convention rather than what's actually going on, we have to think about the difference between free morphemes and bound morphemes, because some morphemes can occur all by themselves, and that's, for example, hunt. dog, green, run. Then there are other morphemes that only occur as bound to another word. And so, for example, the in hunter, there's no such thing as saying, oh, look, there goes an There's not, you can't hold an in your hand. The is something that is only appended to, for example, a verb. And so you have hunter. Or, for example, the past marker, which we think of graphically as ed. That's something that cannot occur alone. When you're thinking about something going on in the past, you wouldn't say that you're thinking about or something like that. It's only something that can be appended to a verb so that you get hunted, walked, and things like that. And so this is the difference between free and bound. And one way that you know that a morpheme is bound is when nothing can come between it and the root that it applies to. And so, for example, in English, we use a free morpheme to indicate the future, and that's will. And so you can say, I will shiver, and then you can separate will and shiver by saying, I will certainly shiver, if you ever wanted to say that. But then, on the other hand, if you were talking about shivering in the past, you could not say, I shiver certainly. You can say, I certainly shivered, but you can't put the certainly between the shiver and the ed. That's because the ed is bound. Now, the fact is that if you look at languages around the world, you find that they differ in terms of to what extent their morphemes, especially the ones that just serve grammatical functions, are bound versus whether they are free. Often, a language will have morphemes, many of which are bound, like in English and other European languages. But then, there are also languages where morphemes are not bound at all. So, for example, in Vietnamese, and this is similar in many languages of East and Southeast Asia, morphemes are free to a much greater extent than anything that we consider intuitive. And so, as a result, you have a language that chops things up much more. You can look at this Vietnamese example, for example, and you can see that even the way that Vietnamese indicates we is with two morphemes, one word for I, and then a separate morpheme, free, not bound, that indicates the plural. Because if you think about it, what we is two I's. In Vietnamese, that's played out right there. Or even this take start that you see, which is for to begin. And the take start divides up the concept of beginning in a way that is different from what would be done in English. So, linguists call languages like Vietnamese analytic languages. Now, perhaps